fifth Beyond the Plate program. We're talking about financial generosity in age of COVID-19. Just waiting a little bit more for a couple more people to hop on, and everything is working. My guest is Paul Nazareth today. He's the Vice President of at the Canadian Association of Gift Planners, Vice President for Education and Development. Tell me what you do every day. What gets you up in the morning?
Yes, well, our organization was founded to be a bridge between three key groups. Was to teach charities about donations of assets, because 90% of the charitable world just thinks about cash, but the largest donations in a person's lifetime at any stage are using assets, stocks, properties, wills, that kind of thing. And then we actually are the bridge between charities and advisors, because in fact, you can't transfer stocks without a broker, you can't make a will without a lawyer, but very often they're not charitably inclined. So we actually teach advisors how to help their clients to make effective gifts. And then lastly, we try to inspire the public with campaigns like Leave a Legacy. And now in 2020, we'll be launching a new one called Willpower, which will be trying to create a social normalization of bequests, to make it normal for Canadians to think, I've created wealth. Part of that means that I give it back through my will.
And does that include churches? I mean, are churches thinking about this?
Oh, you bet. Our organization, most charitable organizations, policy, think tank, everything, they don't like to admit it, but it all leads back to a pew, right? So I actually, in late teens, I started in this work. I was a fundraiser for an international mission charity. And our association was founded after a group of church fundraisers were meeting. But they said, again, all of our churches, all of our institutions focus only on cash. We need to expand out at the time to gift annuities, life insurance, all of that. And so, Ken Ramsey, head of the United Church Planned Giving Office, and Laurie Longton, who was with the Anglican Diocese of Canada, they came and founded this association, CAGP. So although we have quite a number of secular charities, quite a number are faith-based.
Once again, good morning to everyone who's hopping on. This is the Beyond the Plate show, Financial Generosity in COVID-19. My guest is Paul Nazareth, who's the Vice President, Education and Development at the Canadian Association of Gift Planners. And as always with this, we really welcome your comments and questions as we're going through. So do put those into the comments section. I'm monitoring that, and we'd love to have your interaction today. And Paul's just been telling us a bit about his work at the CAGP. It sounds fascinating. Is this a good time for churches to be talking about legacy giving, like right now?
Absolutely, it is. So, many people will maybe have heard that at the start of the pandemic, there was this very mysterious panic run on making wills, right? So I told people wills were like the toilet paper of the pandemic in terms of personal finance. We have now had some financial psychologists unpack this and say what was happening was people were faced with their own mortality. And so we're trying to control whatever they could control. And the only thing they can control about mortality is their will. So tens of thousands of Canadians went and panic redid their wills to say, if I pass away right now, let's figure out who gets what in today's context. Because most people have an out of date will, and more than half Canadians don't even have one. So they did that in a panic. And the challenge was that they were not thinking charitable. They were just thinking family and heirs. And what we found from the estate planning world is after all of this, when we come out of it, there's going to be a massive redoing of those wills, and they will be values-based. And when we talk about values, when people say, where do my values come from? Church is number one, and churches are going to need to be ready to respond to that wave. They will be in those wills, but we're going to have to be ready. And that actually means websites, number one, and the material in the office, number two.
Yeah, about planned giving, making that available, helping people think that through. Yeah.
Yep. And again, just keeping it real simple, because again, a lot of our language has confused the heck out of everybody. What is planned giving? What is planning up? Gifts and wills. If you don't include your church in your will, here's the wording, and we're incredibly grateful.
Yeah, this is how you can do that. Is there a particular age at which people review their wills, generally speaking? Like, it's not really when they're 89, is it?
Yes. So we've actually, part of this new campaign, Willpower, that we're launching, we We've done a Canadian study with embryonics across the country, every age group, every province. And we've got new data finally on when Canadians make wills, how many people in what cohort have wills. So no surprise, the older ages, because the old stat was 51% of Canadians have a will. Well, there's 20-year-olds in that number. So people above 75, you're approaching 90% of them have wills, right? And then in the 50 zone, about 60%, and then it drops down in the younger ages. You know, people should make a will whenever they change legal status. Marriage, children, anything else, legal status should be the driver. What is the driver? Vacations. So before
Vacations.
Number one time a Canadian makes a will is before they abscond, usually on a hot vacation in the winter. They just think, I'm leaving the country, anything could happen, I'll do the will. And it's the most ineffective strategy, but that's how it plays out.
How fascinating.
This pandemic has changed the whole game. More wills were made between March and May than maybe in the last 5 years. So that's where, again, the estate planning world is actually kind of a bit in panic to say, there's a lot going on here. So we're really trying to figure it out.
Really interesting. So that's something the church has got to be kind of on the lookout for right now.
In a good way.
In a good way, absolutely, yeah. Because it's about helping people express their values, as you said, and we can make that possible. And sometimes we forget to ask.
They're discerning, and when they're discerning, they need that grace.
Yeah. This is one possible way you can do that. Just welcome everyone else who's hopping on. Don't forget, we welcome your comments and questions as we're talking today. So, I mean, COVID-19 has really revealed sort of sharpened the focus on the sort of funding environment the church faces itself in right now. And really things that we were putting off thinking about, we really have to think about now. Can you talk a bit more about that? I mean, what is the situation the church and charities are in now in terms of funding, digital, all those things?
So, there's a couple different things here. One is Imagine Canada, which is an organization that often looks to represent the charitable sector and speak on our behalf to government in different areas, immediately started drawing in information when the pandemic started. And they took different cohorts, types of charities. And when it came to specifically the church segment, when they went to the government, they said, look, the charitable sector needs help. They were actually saying that churches took the single highest revenue hit of any type of charity in Canada. On average, 75% loss of income, but in the more urban areas, 90+% loss of income. So it's really dire. And the challenge is, unlike a lot of other charitable organizations who have the different mechanisms to reconnect with donors and frankly, keep the revenue flowing, a lot of churches had not built the system to communicate. It was bulletins, not websites. It was weekly sermons, not email. A lot of churches don't have strong email lists of their core volunteers, of their parish pastoral councils, all of that, let alone the actual congregation. So now people have been really trying to rebuild this. And in rebuilding it, we will also then rebuild that financial stability.
Absolutely. And that's something that we can't, I meant to say, Jillian said that she's excited about the Willpower campaign, and the Diocese of Niagara is absolutely signed on. So good for you. We'll have to do the same. She also asked, what report is that from the decline? She missed that.
Yes. So that was the Imagine Canada report.
Imagine Canada.
Surveys. Ontario Nonprofit Network did one as well, but they're more on the policy side. So Imagine Canada did a report because they're the ones who went to the government to say, we're not talking about funding to do good work. We're telling you that 10% of charities could go bankrupt if you don't provide funding for the operation of charities. So that's when, and it was Imagine Canada that pushed the government to extend the different CPIRB funding and all of that into charities. So that was a key part. So the Imagine Canada report, but I'll tell you, right before all of this kicked off in January, Imagine Canada also did quite a controversial blog post that says, as Canadians are going to church less and less, we are seeing a massive decline in donations because no one is teaching the concept of generosity. Stewardship is no longer part of societal vernacular. Who will teach this? And they were saying corporations and It was tongue in cheek because obviously not. But it was a great kind of challenge to the sector as well, because we've got to be honest too about what does church community represent. It's so easy for the secular world to talk about that, but they don't know what they're talking about, right? We do have representation. It's just that things are shifting.
And the church should be able to talk about generosity, gratefulness, generosity. That's kind of should be our kind of meat and potatoes almost when we're talking about this.
Absolutely. It all comes back to, and again, the stats show this, Statistics Canada show that the most generous donors in Canada are churchgoers. And in fact, who is teaching them, not their alma mater, not their university, they're teaching them on the strategy of giving, how to make the really big donations, but how to make donations part of your life. Again, this is the core of stewardship. Leaving that old language of tithing and coming into a new language of gratitude. It's actually, the one funny thing about tithing is it has a ceiling.
Yeah.
Gratitude has no ceiling. And that's why whenever I would talk to fundraisers in the faith concept, I would always say, don't ever pretend you're the fundraiser. We're the facilitator. God is the fundraiser. The Holy Spirit's the fundraiser. They're the most dangerous fundraiser out there. Yeah. When a donor prays over what should I give, if it's truly in gratitude for the gifts we've been given, and they listen close, they don't want to hear the answer, because the answer is always all of it.
That's absolutely right.
Yep. I
love that. But I love that. What a great thing. Tithing has a ceiling. Gratitude has no ceiling.
And again, donors will come to us. I worked in a bank for a while as a philanthropic advisor. And why did the bank hire me? They were very open. They said, we don't actually know how to talk to Christians. This is my cat.
Well, it's a cat. Hello.
And so they said, we don't actually understand the concept of a client wanting to give everything. That's a terrible business strategy, right? And so it was really fascinating, again, to help people unpack the philanthropy of generosity. How do I give in life? And again, what we were doing was making sure they were taking advantage of the tax benefits, but they were also making sure it was the right thing for that age and stage. But when it came to the faith-based generosity givers, it was a very different conversation.
A lot of churches, I know in the Anglican world anyways, are across the country, many of our dioceses have been really gracious about giving churches a break on their various assessments that they pay into the central, because obviously, as you said, income has gone down. But with that comes an opportunity, I think. And what would you say to churches they've been given, yes, they have this drop in money coming in, but they've also been given a holiday by the diocese. I know in Montreal, it was 6 months and you don't have to pay. It's not like a loan. It was just a complete release. And it was, very gracious thing to do. So what should churches be doing right now, during this time? They have 6 months. What can they do?
It's a challenge. Full disclosure, at different times in my life, I've worked for dioceses and I really believe in this concept of central support. In fact, one of the things, because I get to, when I worked for the Catholic Archdiocese of Toronto, that was my denomination. But then when I went to CanadaHelps, and I was there for a number of years, and actually, again, so many people don't know, CanadaHelps was born in a church pew. The idea of 3 teenagers who were computer engineers came home for Christmas. Their moms forced them to go to church, and they were sitting in the pew looking at the basket going, there's got to be a better way to do that. And those teenagers went and built CanadaHelps. So, there's a reminder to us that we need that ministerial support. A diocesan concept is one of the most effective for how do you off-book some of the ministerial supports, making sure there isn't duplication of the actual business functions, et cetera. So, you have this one thing. It's kind of like, people are getting mortgages deferred right now. Using that capital to actually keep the operations strong. And when I mean operations, when I would talk to donors about what they put in that basket, if they just thought about light, heat, whatever, it was very minimal. But and this is something the Anglican community is incredibly advanced at, narrative budgeting, narrative language, ministerial language. In the secular world of fundraising, the fundraisers like to say that money drives mission. Well, in the faith community, ministry drives money. When people see ministry happening, and again, one of the most important things that churches can do is remind people that you are coming here and seeing a timely function of who we are, right? Imagine Canada also did a great reflection once to say, what is a church? A church is a community center, a YMCA, You know, AA was born in church basements.
Mhm.
It works 7 days a week. You just see 1 hour of one day.
Yeah.
People understand the rest of what that means. And frankly, again, we've tested a focus group at different times in my career. What does that mean to you? It's ministry. They understand the many facets of ministry, the money flows.
Yes, absolutely. And sometimes we're just not even telling those stories.
Truly, again, I took this for my work in the Catholic world with churches, that narrative budgeting, that projective budgeting, to say, here's what we do with your money. And number one reason why Canadians don't give again, and give more is that they don't understand what the charity did with the money.
Yeah.
And so when a church says, here's what we did with it, but here's what we could do with it. Scarcity to abundance. You know, the dark secret of church fundraising is, if you talk about youth ministry, or, you know, the things that are at the core of the faith, the wallets open up. People,
absolutely,
they want to give to that. We also, as fundraisers, need to not make it too easy. We need to not overpromise and say that's the only thing going on. We need people to buy into everything that a church does. So again, you know, outreach to isolated seniors, outreach from a ministry perspective to different groups, as much as they may not be project or sexy, those are the most important community functions of a church.
Yeah, it's huge. And even it can be something small, like, I mean, you know, a church that runs a breakfast program, or a church that's just running a meal program, community meals. Yep. Those are really crucial.
Toronto's first out of the colds in the city. And, you know, we were doing 2,100 meals a weekend. You know, when it was funny, the United Church was quoted in the Globe and Mail of saying, we've created a real estate trust because we realized that we have more property than Sobeys. And when we do a Statistics Canada value per square foot, we have as much value to a community that is not our congregation as the people that come here. We are feeding the poor, we are clothing the homeless, we are doing all of it, and 50% of that is secular.
Right, yeah.
And, you know, my question at the time when I heard that was, is 50% of our funding secular? It's not. It's So, you know, we actually have to speak to the faithful about how generous they are being. Do they even understand the social impact that they're having? And in a lot of cases, they don't know.
Yeah, they don't even realize. I wanted to pick up on something you said, from scarcity to abundance. I think that's such a crucial mindset.
It's a challenge, because every time in my CanadaHelps life, when I would go see a church, they would say, but the fees. And I would tell them, I said, you know, the challenge is, if you're only ever thinking about on cost, you're never going to grow, right? You know, we started this whole thing in caves. We got to go back to our entrepreneurial spirit of that evangelism and bootstrapping. We're the original entrepreneurs. And it's not that we don't have to think about fees. We got to be responsible, but we need to be trusting in grace. We're the people preaching spirit. We have to trust in the spirit, speak in ministry, speak in value. And people are often, when we do that, you know, my colleague Jillian Doucette Campbell's on this call, you know, it does that as a classically trained fundraiser. But once you add in grace, again, there's just no ceiling.
Yeah.
People give, and it's surprising to folks what they give. Because again, we're not a very sophisticated charity. So we're not doing wealth indicators like a university is. We don't know what people have. And actually, again, when I was in the bank and I saw what people had, Christians are so painful because they're humble savers. They do not have flashy cars. They do not have big homes, but they save, save, save. And if someone inspires them to say, here's what we could do together, they will give. And they will shock you with their generosity.
Yeah, absolutely. Jillian says, it was Paul who many years ago introduced me to a book, A Spirituality of Fundraising by Henri Nouveau. Yeah, I've been reading that this week too. Yeah.
I'm excited to say we're about to get a book from a living expert. Lori Gunther Reeser is one of Canada's foremost experts in church giving. And I've been bothering her for years because she is one of the greatest articulators of church giving, offertory, the plate, and she's finally writing a book. So it's just about to come out. And when it comes out, it's going to be a great resource for those of us that serve the people of the pews.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I love Laurie. We had her on. She was on this a few weeks ago.
Yeah, we got to
And
keep pushing her.
you got to keep using her. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And she's a lot of fun as well. Just thanking everyone who's online and bringing your comments. And as I said, bring your comments and questions, or if you wanted to say yes. Hi, Anderson. Nice to see you. Yeah, Jillian says she's fantastic. She sure is. And so are you, Jillian. Jillian was on last week, and we had a really great conversation. So there's a lot of great stuff going on. In that, I want to just kind of, you used a phrase when we were preparing this that I wanted you to unpack for me about the funding ecosystem of a church. What on earth do you mean by that?
You know, like a lot of people on this call, we live in churches, right? I grew up in it. I was a kid at the bake sales, at the Vincent de Paul trucks, and all of that. And growing up, I saw the community element. And actually now, as I start to, I've worked in ministry, I've worked in churches, I've worked for a university, I've worked for a bank, CanadaHelps, and now in this role teaching. And in a lot of those roles now, I get to see churches as another entity. I get to see churches from an economic standpoint and community value. Again, United Church did this, Anglican Church talked about that narrative, that a church as community center is as functioning as a YMCA. There's just no elliptical machine. So that's the three elements where we talked was community, business, and charity. So from a community standpoint, if churches get, especially now, get good at articulating their social value, they'll get more money from their congregants, but there is totally an open opportunity to go start pitching community foundations, local foundations, city funding. There's other revenue sources that we should use this time to start opening up for our churches because we do that work.
Absolutely, and in ways big and small, don't we?
Yeah, you know, there was one of the small notes Imagine Canada mentioned was that organizations like AA, Rotary, there's quite a number of them, as they're projecting the Legion will be out of business in 5 years. Mm-hmm. We know that in Canada, in fact, there was an article in CBC that talked about how there are 28,000 faith-based buildings in Canada. And we project as a government and as heritage properties to lose 1/3 of them before 2030, 10,000, and 8,000 of those will be churches. And the challenge is that quite a number of them, it's not necessarily about the congregations, that those buildings as community hubs are still needed. We know that congregations are shifting, not declining. Because again, even as the communities, I was born and raised in downtown Toronto, our communities have shifted to the 905 and the 705 and the 416 new immigrants, new Canadians who are not particularly Christian. But we're building churches in the places where people have shifted to. So we have to recognize that and triage those buildings. But we also have a responsibility, great organization called Trinity Centers. And it's an organization dedicated from converting churches, not to condos, but community centers. Mm. So that's still needed, and we still need to have the generosity to figure out what that looks like. But our ministry is still there, and it's rooted in community.
Yeah, absolutely. Just as you said, I like the idea of triaging these buildings that we have.
And again, still community purpose, food banks, community hubs, all of that. And actually, when they do that, they can also still function in a faith capacity, right? Ministry is always needed. It just doesn't always have to look like the full suite that we have in a fully functioning church with a pastor and an office and all that. So that's the community element. The business one is the next one.
Yeah, just a couple of comments on that. Leanne says, community articulates social value. I think that's absolutely right, isn't it?
That's it.
Jillian said, yes, so important to show and share our values and mission, show our relevancy. Absolutely. And those are just stories that churches could be telling.
That's it.
And often are not.
I remember, these are fundraising stories.
Yeah, this is about fundraising.
Secular, community-minded people, municipal counselors are always shocked to hear that, again, AA meets in our basement.
Yeah.
Organizations come to and meet in our lobby. We were the first ones to do kids, all this YMCA stuff. We were doing it 100+ years ago. Every hospital was built brick by nuns, right? We've just got to recognize what that all comes back to, because once the secular world pushes it out, make no mistake, they're working every day to push it out. They will lose their tether to the spiritual and ministerial world, and they lose their purpose and they lose their focus.
Yeah.
Actually, we have a responsibility to, one, remind them, but also remind the community what we're still doing, and funding will follow that.
Absolutely. And there are a lot of little things that churches are doing that they're not even kind of themselves aware of. So those stories we need to tell. We just need to say, hey, food, like we're doing this community meal here. It's really crucial. And I think that one of the pivots churches need to make is from entertainment to hospitality, it seems to me. Like entertainment fundraising, where we invite people in, make them pay, entertain them. It's kind of been...
I really struggle with that piece. Again, I think a lot of that entertainment thing is community building.
Mm-hmm.
But I wouldn't always say it's the best fundraising, because it's one of the highest amount of costs for the lowest amount of return.
Yeah.
When it comes to a community building element, absolutely. Right. Again, I have a problem, and in life you allocate your obsessions to work, and then you become a career success. So I have no hobbies, and I read T3010 tax forms before bed, and I read the history of charity legalities. I even read all the documents. More than 50% of Canada's food banks were born in churches.
Yeah.
Still, 1/4 of Canada's food banks are solidly connected, and they only operate because of revenue from churches. Food banks are tied to us. That community aspect is tied to us. So much of incorporated legal Canadian charity born in the pews.
Yeah, absolutely. Church's community. So what about this church's business?
So the church's business is important is because if there's one thing we can do at this time is actually do the work while a lot of physical buildings are closed to raise our game in terms of monetary infrastructure. My first job when I left university was for an advertising and publishing company called Liturgical Publications. And it makes the most number of church bulletins in all of Canada. It was like 1,800 at the time. And I was 17, 18 years old, spending a week in churches doing the publishing of the bulletin. So confirming all the advertisers on the back and then doing the publishing. But when I was having those conversations with the advertisers and saying, why do you pay money for that thing that goes out to people every week? You're an insurance guy. And again, the church is a hub of business, of community. And there's a lot of transactions that are non-donation that take place. In fact, if there's one thing that churches could get better at for their congregations, it's getting up to speed, point of sale devices and things to sell tickets to the choir, the Christmas concert. We're still using cash. It's 2020. Tim Hortons, everybody's got tap.
Yeah.
They're still dealing with cash. When we ask, or the banks did a great study with Canadians, why do you go to bank machines? And they didn't want to put the study out because there was a super high amount of people saying, I go on Sunday before church because it's the only place I need cash.
Right.
And so that's the challenge. Right now, from a business standpoint, we could raise our game in terms of operations, point of sale, ticket sales, everything down to the bake sale, because you think, bake sales, we're transacting a quarter, but people want to give you 10, 20, 30, 40, $50 for that muffin. They need tap to do it.
Yeah.
Right? Besides, yes, seniors carry those larger amounts of money, but we know we're talking about 70 and 80-year-olds. And it's time for us to say, as we transfer generations to the boomers, not the millennials, there's a need for those kind of transactional pieces. So from a business standpoint, just think about the operations of a church and how many things people do have to pay for. Sunday school, tickets to conference things. One of the reasons why we don't get people to the really cool Lenten missions is because the kind of crappy way we sell tickets. You got to go to the office, and the office is closed most of the time that working people are working.
Mm.
We want bodies. We need more people at those Lenten missions to take those homilies and different mission pieces. But what's holding people back? Actually, it's the business element. It's not the spiritual element. So in this time, we're seeing a lot of churches get up on their EFT money transfer, on getting their point of sale devices set up, on getting their online donation and online payment set up for tickets, not just donations. That's what will build a strong ecosystem for the world going forward.
Oh, I love that. So you're even talking about like when we sell tickets, because it's true, we're still selling tickets in the church hall after, church on Sunday in cash. So what you're saying is we really need tap and go.
And again, even the, diocesan financial controls and finance councils and all of that, the holy rollers won't be around forever. The people that roll the coins and all that kind of stuff. This is where, again, from a money standpoint, it's a service issue to people so that they don't, there's nothing that makes me more pained as a parishioner when I can't do the things on Sunday I need to do because they didn't tell us it was going to happen. We're selling tickets to this and that. We're selling flowers over here and there's candles over there. If I'm not coming there with cash, what can I do? Again, I've been to churches. You know, the United States is always 10 years ahead of us, and that's technology. I've literally been to churches in the States and where, you know, they've got tap at the candles, you've got tap for tickets. You know, it's from a business standpoint to be able to serve people, but absolutely raise more capital. We need to get better at all those transactional devices. From a business perspective, you got to think like a Tim Hortons.
Think like a Tim Hortons, everybody. Yeah.
Everybody spends all their time there afterwards anyway, right? Whenever I work with donor churches, I go visit them at the church, and then we go to Tim's after for the students. Yeah. That's where the seniors groups are. Yeah. I did my major gift fundraising. Just sat down with a group of people, talked about what the church does, answered their questions, and said, listen, I'm going to leave it up to you. Again, go pray about it. And they would go, and then it wouldn't be $1,000 donation. It would be a $10,000 donation. Yeah. When one of them said, hey, I give my alma mater, I give my university stocks. Can I give securities to my church? Absolutely, you can. And in Canada, securities is the #1 most beneficial way to give. It won't happen right now because of the state of the stock market, but we will have a rally before December 31st. And anybody who can take stocks, we've seen, again, I've built CanadaHelps' stocks giving program at churches, and people who give stocks give a large percentage more than they would have given if they were giving cash.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and giving, you know, stocks and assets like that is a long-term gift anyways. I was at a church where someone had put the church in his will, and he lived to 101. So, you know.
The American Anglican Church actually did a study about gift annuities. And that people who had gift annuities actually, they showed in mortality tables that they lived longer.
Yeah, they're going to wait that out. But by the time when he did die, I mean, it was a very considerable gift. That's what I'm saying.
Again, we also got to know, and this comes from Canadian studies with our colleague Penelope Burke and Cygnus Research, that people that confirm a bequest to your church will give more money in life.
Yes.
You've actually solidified the relationship with you. You are now, and I would always tell them, you got season tickets to this place. Like I would go to a church and sit down in a pew, and then I'd get an older person coming up and giving me the stink eye because that's my seat. I said, you sat here your whole life from baptism to burial. Would you make sure that this seat is here for somebody else? And so they make the will and they automatically start giving more in life. So right now, stocks are really about offering. It's really exciting. Pastors are really excited to start seeing people give their entire offering in January. And we tell them, what could the church do with that? Now they can start to do capital projects.
Yeah. Interesting. But so Leanne Matthews is commenting on that. Tim Hortons for the win. So your piece of advice for us is think like Tim Hortons.
That's right. We can beat Tim Hortons because they were taken over by a Brazilian company that's running them into the ground. So
I know.
They can't, right? So again, truly, that what they've lost is that community connection, that humble element that churches own. If we think like that old school Tim's, that community-minded organization, service, community, connection, we can outmaneuver everybody. So
I love it. Yes, service, community, connection, but you're also saying just get those tap and goes in there, get that infrastructure in your church.
You know what? You got to let the arteries got to be clear for the blood to flow. And we've created so many barriers to money.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think as well, like just opportunities for people to express their generosity.
That's it. Again, we're going to church, and this was an Honorary Noun thing where he said, you are not fundraising. You are facilitating spiritual generosity.
Yes.
Your job is not even to ask. Your job is to make sure that every element for there to be grace and giving, you are making it easy. You are creating the conduit. You are just making sure that it's easy to flow, that it's organic. We are secular charities outside the doors to that church. It is another world. But inside here, people want to do it. Again, when it comes to wills, it's not even saying, please leave the church in your will. If you would like to do so, if you feel that stewardship connection, when I was in a bank in a trust company and I was looking at all their tax receipts and we were making the estate plan, I would say, sorry, I see a pre-authorized giving amount in here. I see second collections and a ministerial gift. The church is not in the will. And it was like the V8 commercial from the 80s. Oh, my church. And I said, yeah, I call it. Just said you had season tickets. People are there weekly. They don't give to anything else charitably weekly. And yet that's the one time they often forget. So all we're doing is saying, if you want to, if is a more powerful word than would you. People worry about asking. We don't even have to ask. We just have to make sure that the offer is out there, that the language is out there, and people will respond.
Yeah, this is what Jillian was saying. She said, how would you encourage clergy and church leadership to be okay with talking about planned gifts?
I did a lot of this in my time in the diocese, and it was simply walking with pastors to say, I know that the world of fundraising makes you uncomfortable. Good. I don't like it either. An adult onset allergy to chocolate almonds. Let's talk about stewardship. Let's talk about grace. And as a pastor, just making sure those different times of year that we say, please remember the church and the estate plan. Please remember your offering, your pre-authorized giving, and all of that. But the most important thing for a pastor to do on the calendar, and we got to set the date. It's got to be January, August, and then November. Aggressive thank yous. Number one thing the churches don't do well is say thank you. We're notorious for giving out tax receipts without letters that say this was a sacrifice. We talked about sacrificial giving, and we appreciate it. It is going to ministry. Thank you. So, the pastors are always worried about asking. If they spend more time thanking, the gifts will flow. And again, thanking means not just we're grateful for your generosity, but here's what we did with the money. And, again, when we talk to pastors about ministry, saying you don't got to ask them for money, but just tell them what we would do if you had more of it.
Yeah.
Right? We want a youth ministry. We know that the washrooms are an Indiana Jones fire hazard. I more money to start. Washrooms in the church are a really key thing. Again, we're talking
essential.
A baby change tables and real, then that's ministry, right? So once we start on those things, then the pastors, once they get one or two major gifts under their belt, it is grace addictive.
Yes, yeah. And people understand that language. That's stuff they understand. Yeah. Absolutely. So make it easy, create a conduit, Leanne's saying. And
we're here to just facilitate those gifts of grace, and stewardship is the framework.
And set the date, January, August, and November, aggressive thanks. Why those 3 points?
Yes. So January is tax receipt season.
Yeah.
So usually what we do, some grumpy lector says on Sunday service, go get your receipts, people. The office doesn't want to have to mail them. If we've got to mail them, no. The receipts are at the back in the hall from the pastor and the pastoral council. Thank you for what you give. We're grateful for what you give. In the envelope, yes, I know some churches have stockpiled the windowed envelope for 30 years. Yes, we've got to change it. There's got to be a letter in there from the pastor and the pastoral council. Thank you. So that's the January. August is as everybody gets back to school mindset, just reminding everybody, please remember the things that we do as you're thinking about your gifts, that giving season. Church is here. We do a lot of ministry. Here's what's going on. But again, a thank you for everything you do. You helped us survive over the summer. To all you pre-authorized people, if you wonder why you're on it, you went to the cottage, but you kept the lights on.
Yep.
August, actually September, we found is quite a number, is the number one time outside of January of pre-authorized giving conversion. We're trying to get basket people on the envelopes, envelope people on the pre-authorized into major donations and asset-based giving. And then the November season is that everybody asks in December, wrong play. That's when already in Advent and everybody's brains turned off. November is the planting of the seed, saying as you're feeling that generosity, we're the place to help you express that. Please remember us in December. Anybody who primes, again, we are farmers. We are pastoral. Mm-hmm. Plant the seed, you will reap a bigger, more ripe fruit, as opposed to trying to flip it in 2 weeks, which is when everybody asks. Christmas Eve is the wrong time to ask.
Yeah.
Yeah. Plus, we lock all our office doors on Christmas Eve, right? We're the worst business ecosystem in the whole charitable world. We make people feel great, and then we lock the office door, and then we wonder why the donations don't come in.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, thank you, thank you, thank you. Spend more time thanking than asking, says Leanne. Elizabeth Shama, she's the administrator of our cathedral. She says, preparing thank you letters has become a big part of my job. It's pretty much all I've done this week. So yeah, that's been one of the constant messages. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
And again, the last one we were going to talk about was this charity.
Let's get on to that. Let's talk about that.
Again,
Yeah.
people just forget. And actually, I've done focus groups in some of my other roles. People would say to me, oh, churches aren't charities, are they? And really fascinating and important that you don't want them to lump you in with sick kids and everything else that's secular. Inside those church walls, we are family, we are community, we are connected. Yes, there is a stewardship connection, and in the old world of tithing was one thing, but in the new world of stewardship, we are a charity. But also, we've got to remember that we've got to be good charities. So the T3010 reporting, so that there's financial transparency, and you don't want them to go to the revenue agency website to find out what the church does.
No.
Because that pie chart is awful. Administration, overhead, all that. Again, the Anglican community with the narrative budget and narrative finance reporting is the most advanced in the Christian world. And so if people can take advantage of that to say, yes, we are a charity, here's how the money flows. And again, doing the receipting element well, being tight and timely with those receipts, not just the offering at the end of the year or January, but the stocks, again, administrating bequests, getting bequest wording out there. That's where, as a charity, churches can really raise their game. So they can learn from the sick kids and the U of T's and other worlds. Again, a cathedral is that emotional seat of a diocese. Mm-hmm. People feel real strong connections to it. I used to have pastors tell me, wow, the cathedral, it's another thing out of my mind. Where do we all go when our community has something to express or feel? We go to a cathedral. Where do people feel right now? They're dying for that connection. Their parish. So if we think like charities and make sure that we're operating like good charities, we don't want to be outmaneuvered by the Humane Society. But in a lot of times, because they're asking regularly, they're doing the tax receipting, they're doing the effective reporting, they're beating us. Mm-hmm. We hold a much stronger place in the hearts of our parishioners and donors than a lot of these other organizations.
Yeah, I mean, the YMCA, I give to the YMCA, I'm part of the YMCA, and they're very on top of all that. Yeah. And they have a really clear mission, more than a gym, a cause.
But boom, in this crisis, the YMCA has laid off 75% of their staff.
I know.
That was the Imagine Canada report. Again, what's interesting is I really do believe that in this crisis, as we hit the first, we come out of it, churches will again be turned to fulfill that societal purpose we did 100 years ago in this country. Our connection from Confederation to the 1970s was the absolute foundation of all charity.
It sounds to me like then we just need to be ready for that.
Ready for our, to relive our history in a good way.
Yeah.
We reminded ourselves and to the community of what we were all about then and now. Generosity, community, connection, curation, convening, right? These are the things actually that society learned from us, right? Again, we use the word stewardship is used in the secular world of fundraising quite a bit, but it's all roots back to that Christian model. That's why that Henry Nouwen book and other ones really resonate, because they give us a bit more theological language. And I've found that's what pastors and councils have resonated with.
Yeah, absolutely. Gosh, I love that, all your C's there: community, connection, curating, convening.
For me, that's the thing that makes an organization strong.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my gosh, Paul, time has really flown by. It's already 40 minutes we've been here. So do you have any give me one last piece of advice that what other churches really need to hear right now in a sentence or two?
What do we fall back on? It's prayer, it's spirit, and we need to do that in this case too. Whenever we have problems, we put them on the altar, we trust, and we pray. And we need to do that with the revenue side of things as well. We remember that while all the secular world has all this is in crisis because their power is limited, we have a power source that is unlimited. And just rely on that and make sure to build up some of the secular pieces to serve the community. We'll be good coming out of this. In fact, we'll be better coming out of this. We build those connective elements, the transaction, again, business, community, charity. We build the infrastructure and then leave it on the altar and connect it to the spirit, unstoppable.
In terms of infrastructure, I just wanted you to say something really clear to our churches about that. So does that mean it means having some kind of tap and go, making sure that you have digital means of giving?
You know, I mean, fully. I worked with Canada Helps when it was first founded. In my fundraising life, and still even now. You know, they've cleared me to share this, but I've been pushing them for years for churches to bring on pre-authorized giving and EFT. Yeah. So by the fall, Canada Helps will also have pre-authorized processing with tax receipting. So that's going to be wonderful to help congregations to do that, because now they do it with banks, but they have to do all this work for the tax receipting. Canada Helps is going to have that as well.
Oh, that's fantastic.
They can plug into the online giving. The Anglican Church is specifically connected to the stock program of Canada Helps, but then for your transactions, for those ticket sales and everything, we need the point of sale devices. We need to be better with the transactions. So it's time to call the bank and say, look, you make money, we make money. You need to be better at helping us to build out the ecosystem. So, you know, again, you know, how does Tim's do it? That's when I was working in churches, I would really say, how do I make this convenient for our people in the way that they move millions and billions of dollars? People are coming to us and they want to do stuff. If they don't have the cash, they can't do it. How do I convert everything to make it easy?
Yeah, absolutely. But I want to end on that wonderful note that you're giving us. Put problems on the altar, trust and pray. It's absolutely it. Or as Jillian says, well, we have a power source that's unlimited. That's absolutely right, isn't it? Paul, thank you so much for a fascinating conversation. I've just really gotten so much out of this. I hope our audience has as well. So thank you for your time and passion. And